Hello, my name is Sharon Serrago, and I am here to help you with your SAT writing section. The writing section on the SAT and the ACT is very much alike, so when you finish this course, you will be prepared for both of them. Today, we're going to start with subject-verb agreement. It's one of the things that they test many times on those tests, verb agreement section. Now there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that you already know, but there's going to be a lot of it you have never heard about before. One thing for sure, in this country we have been very lax with our language, and in certain parts of the country, down here in Texas where I'm from, I always tell the students we slaughter the King's English. So we cannot depend upon what we hear all the time and think that that's always going to be correct. Many times the kinds of language that we hear spoken is not correct. So when we take the test, one of the things that we have to do is learn to turn our ears off and stop listening to things and saying, oh my gosh, that sounds great. That's what everybody says. Because too many times what you hear is very often wrong. And that's why I'm here to help you so that you can analyze all these sentences, you'll know the rules, and you will be able to find out exactly what the answer is and not just guess because it sounds good to you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, when we talk about subject-verb agreement, you have to know that the subjects and the verbs, of course, have to agree. Whatever your subject is, your verb must agree with it. So, if the subject is plural, then your verb will be plural. And if your subject is singular, then your verb will be singular. For the most part, all verbs that end in S are singular. We only have two exceptions with the pronouns I and you. Those verbs sometimes take singular verbs like I was, and sometimes plural verbs like you were or I have. So when you're dealing with the pronouns I and you, then I would say just go with what you have always said. We don't generally make mistakes with those pronouns. But when you're looking at any other verb, if it ends in S, it's going to be singular. So one of the things that we want to do is to remember that, and I've got that here. All singular verbs end in S. Now I say all with the exception of words that deal with the pronouns I and you. And then we have some of these verbs. I just want you to look at these for a moment. You have is that ends in S, which is singular. You could have said he is. We have are that does not end in S, and you can say they are. They do, plural. Here's one that ends in S, like he does, and it is singular. This one would be plural. Here's another singular one. It ends in S. He seems. This word right here, ask and ask, sounds the same. So if you were trying to decide which one is plural or singular based upon the sound of it, you would have trouble. Know that all singular verbs end in S, and therefore this one would be the singular one. Here's another singular one. It is as easy as that. If the word ends in S, it is going to be singular. If it does not, it will be plural. Let's look at these for a moment and see if you can determine whether these are singular or plural. I'm going to call out the word, and you make a decision, and you might say it out loud, and I will write the letter up there. Was, singular. It ends in S. Look, plural. There is no S at the end. Thinks, singular. It ends in S. Is, singular. It ends in S. Were, plural. It does not end in S. Ask, plural. It does not end in S. And people, again, this is as simple as it gets. If the word ends in S, it's going to be singular. Next, we need to learn about subjects and their relationship to prepositional phrases. First of all, I'd like to tell you that the people who write these tests are not your friends. So one of the things that they're going to do on the test is to fill your sentences up with prepositional phrases, and they will write them in such a fashion that the sentence sounds really great when it's wrong, and the sentence sounds horrible when it's right. And it's all because of these prepositions. So I want you to take a look at this picture for a moment. This cat right here has a relationship to the tree, and anything he can do to the tree is going to be a preposition. So right now he is under the tree. He could be below it. He could be underneath it. Beneath, any words that you can think of to talk about that location. But he could also be above it, he could be on top of it, he could be over it, he could go in it, he could go out of it, he can go around it, he can go through it, any number of things. Those are going to be prepositions when it talks about a spatial relationship. So just look at some of these. We have over, above, under, underneath. Look at these. And you see he could go up it, down, into, out, through, throughout, across. All of these things are going to be prepositions. And of course, these are just only a few of them that I've talked about here. So the next thing that we want to do is figure out how to spot these things. But not all of them talk about spatial relationships. So we have like considering right here. That doesn't talk about space. Despite, this one right here, of, is very, very important. So many students miss this one, so make a mental note of it. So after we finish this video, come back to this page and look at all of these prepositions, and it still is not the complete list. But even so, you should be able to pick prepositions out from sentences. So let's just see if you can. What we're going to do here is just simply find the preposition. That's all I want you to do. So here, the preposition would be on. On number 2, into. And here's that word I told you to remember. Number 3, before, another one in, another one in. Now, just right now, let's just notice how many of these are two-letter words. We have on, we have of, we have in. Basically, when you run into a two-letter word, it's going to be a verb, or it could be an infinitive, but more than likely it's going to be a preposition. So that might help you. Number 4, beside. There's of again. Number 5, on, another two-letter word. Here's one that talks about space. Through the window, we could say walked through the door. At, like he was at the tree, he was on the tree. All of those are your prepositions. So now we want to move on to prepositional phrases, because these are the things that we have to be able to recognize in order to help ourselves on the test. Now, a prepositional phrase will always begin with the preposition and it will end with the first noun after it. So our example here, we've got with the dirt on his face is a prepositional phrase. Let me use this. So it starts with a preposition, it ends with the first noun. Starts with a preposition, ends with the first noun. Same thing, starts with a preposition, ends with the first noun every single time. Now, once we get rid of those prepositional phrases, let's see what we have left. We have the dog ran. Now, how hard can it possibly be to find the subject and the verb and decide whether they agree or not? when you have only these two words to look at. That's what we're trying to do, is to get rid of all of this extra stuff here so that we can have only the subject and the verb left. Here we're going to identify prepositional phrases and then see what's left. So on the first one, you would have from the house, on the distant hill. Here's of, up to the first noun, newly blooming tree. And your basic sentence is, few details are seen. You will always be left with a complete sentence when you get rid of prepositional phrases. Let's do number 2. The first preposition we see is with, and therefore we go up to the first noun, and that's our first prepositional phrase. On her skirt, not was, but at the park, in Dallas, in the middle of the day. And we're left with the girl was. You understand that what you need for a sentence is a subject and a verb. The girl was. And was is a very, very common verb. Make a mental note of it. Now on this one, the prepositional phrases are of his car and above the fireplace. But I want to tell you something else about this. Anytime that you see these commas here that separate some phrase or a clause like this, when it sets it off from the sentence, this too can be eliminated, because all we're trying to do is to get down to the basic elements of our sentence, and this is not one. This is just extra information, and we know that it's extra information because it has been set off by these two commas. So look up here. If you have a sentence going along like this, and you have a comma and then some stuff going on and a comma and then your sentence continues, I like to call all this stuff garbage. Those commas tell me it's not necessary, and therefore I can take it out. If you just don't read it, you won't make a mistake, because in this sentence you would have said, David's painting is hanging. And that's all you need. All right, let's go back to number 4, our first prepositional phrase, without a doubt. And the next one, in the experiment, is a verb. And the next one, of the participants. So our basic sentence would be, the most critical factor is the health. There we have it. When we are trying to get the subject and the verb to agree, of course, we have to find the verb. And some of you may have trouble with that. It is the word that generally shows action. It tells what's happening. And it always has a form that uses ing. Every verb in our language has an ing form. So we've got run can turn into running, sing can turn into singing, think into thinking, ask into asking. So sometimes that will help you find your verb. But then we have a be verb. Now if you've been studying foreign languages, you'll know that your be verb is usually irregular, and you have a lot of forms of it. Well, it's the same way in English. Look at all of these things. These are the different forms of the verb be. And yes, we have to memorize it. Here's was that I was telling you about. Here's your be verb right here. Here is the ing form. But all of these are part of the be verb. So when I say that all forms have an ing form, here it is. You can't just isolate was and say wasing. We don't have that. We don't have ising, you see. So our ing form comes from the being. Please be sure that you memorize that verb. Am, are, is, was, were, be, been, being. Then you have some helping verbs down here at the bottom that are going to be used also. Now, when you have one of these helping verbs, it will always be attached to the main verb. And interestingly enough, it's the helping verb that will change form. Look at this. I could say they do, plural, but he does, singular. And this one is the past tense. The past tense never changes from singular to plural. This one would be singular. It has an S. He has. This would be plural. They have. Do you see? So the helping verbs will be the ones that change form. In order to take the test, of course, you're going to have questions over whether or not the subject and the verb agree. It will all hinge on the subject. So once you have found the subject, then you have to find the verb, and you have to see if they agree. Here's how you do that. If the subject is singular, your verb has to be singular also. And remember that your verb will end in S. If your subject is plural, then you have to have a plural verb in order for them to agree. And remember that since all singular verbs end in S, if your verb is plural, it won't have an S on it. Now let's take a look at some sentences and see if you can do these. We are trying to find just the subject and the verb, and then we're trying to decide whether or not these sentences are correct as they're written. So my suggestion is that before you do that, you get rid of the prepositional phrases, because finding the subject and the verb in these sentences is rather difficult. Take a look at number 1 and just make a guess about what you think the subject is. Now, let's do it my way. Let's get rid of the prepositional phrases first. So freeze can't be the subject. Winter can't be the subject. And violet can't be the subject. So basically, we've got come beautiful blooms. So when you're looking for the verb, you want to say, well, what's happening? Something is coming. That's your verb. It shows the action. And then you want to say, well, what's coming? It's the blooms that are coming. That will be your subject. Now you have to make the decision, do they agree? It will hinge on the subject. Since this subject is plural, you have to have a plural verb. And we do have blooms come. Plural subject, plural verb, it does not end in S. All right, let's look at number 2. Take a look and see if you can find the subject. All right, then we mark out the prepositional phrases throughout the room. Remember, was that verb that we just looked at. And then of the child is another prepositional phrase that we mark out. And then we know that was is our verb because we memorized it. And so you're not sure what the subject is. Just say, what was? And you would see that the cries is what we're talking about. Now you have to see if they agree. Cries is plural. So you need a plural verb. But what do you have? You have a verb that ends in S, which makes it singular. So it can't be cries was. It has to be cries were. So we found that this one was correct, and now we have found that this one is incorrect. Then on to number 3. First thing for us is to get rid of these prepositional phrases, because now we know that they're just going to get in your way. And then look here. We have now a comma and another comma here. These commas inside are merely for the series. They're listing 3 things, so they separate them with commas. But these 2 commas are here to separate them from the sentence, to tell us it's not really necessary in the sentence. It's interesting, but it is not part of the very basic sentence. And therefore, our sentence is still very short. The third course were served. Well, if you have fruits and vegetables and cheeses right in front of this, it sounds good to say were. Listen to this. After the second course of their meal, the third course of the feast, which included cheeses, cream, and fruits, were served. This sounds great. Fruits were served. It's wrong. If you cross it out and you don't hear it, then you would just say the third course were served, and you know that that's wrong. Course is singular, which is your subject, and you have to have a singular verb to go with it. So you can't use this one, because if you're looking for a singular verb, it's going to have to end in S, which would be was. The third course was served. So this, oops, I did it wrong. This one is incorrect. Okay? So this should give you a really good idea of what kind of things you're going to be up against on that test. You have to know this. I'm only giving you 3 sentences here to choose from. If you get the whole pack here, you're going to find dozens of examples, more testing information, all kinds of information to practice on. This is just for examples. This gets you halfway through. All right, so now all we need to do is practice this. So we just simply want to find the correct verb. If we get rid of the prepositional phrases, you would see the author. You know that that's singular, and so you need a singular verb, is. If we get rid of the stuff around the commas, which happens to be a prepositional phrase, then you've got a singular subject. I don't care that there were other people going along with her at the party. This is the subject. These are objects of prepositions. And therefore you look only at the subject, one word. It is singular, and therefore you have to find the singular verb to go with it. On the next one, looking for prepositional phrases, we want to get rid of those. And in spite of the fact that it says students, you're going to be inclined to say 2 or 3 students seem, but that's not it. This is not the subject. And you have to get the verb to agree with the subject, which is typewriter. And it is singular, and therefore you need a singular verb, seems. Number 4. Get rid of your prepositional phrase first. You've got collection. Just hop on over to the singular one, and you've got looks. You should be getting in the habit now of ignoring these prepositional phrases. And you've got poems are. Okay. There you go. That's how simple that is. Now we go into something else. We have indefinite pronouns as subjects. These have to be memorized also. So we have, there's a pattern here, and you should memorize the pattern first. One body thing, one body thing, one body thing, and one body thing. Memorize that pattern first. And then you've got everyone, everybody, everything, someone, somebody, something, no one, nobody, nothing, anyone, anybody, anything, and then 4 additional ones, each, either, neither, one. Now, people, the reason you need to memorize these is because they make no sense at all. Although this says every one instead of every 20, when we hear this word, we think that we're talking about some kind of plural something because it's so inclusive of everything else. But the word itself is singular. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Well, first of all, let's get rid of this because this will kill us. We were amazed to discover that one, skip over the prepositional phrases, one was limping. Get rid of this. get rid of this, get rid of this, and then we've got not one seems good enough. Number 3, get rid of this, get rid of this. This is like a participial phrase that functions as an adjective, but it's talking about trees. You can get rid of that, get rid of this. All of those are prepositional phrases, which we don't want to look at. And now we've got each, and you'll remember that was one of your indefinite singular pronouns that you have to remember. It is singular, as is one, and as is one here. And so if that's singular, you have to have a singular verb. This is singular, and we need the singular verb, which will end in S. So the next thing that we do is do some practice. And for the rest of this whole section, you just have practice, practice, practice. And as I told you before, the entire set, the whole set that you have to download has more information, it has more rules, it has more examples, and it certainly has more test questions for you to answer so that you can practice. Just understand, when you're looking at something that's new or even something that you're reviewing, the more practice you get, the better off you are, because all of that repetition does nothing but to reaffirm what you already know. So as I told you, you've got lots of tests to practice on in the next series. So it's going to be very important for you to download the whole program for this section, Subject-Verb Agreement. I know that it's several pages long, not just several, but many pages long, but you've got tons of stuff in there to help you get prepared for this test. And you've got all the answers here. So everything that was on this section, you have answers here. When you get the whole program, there's a lot more stuff, but you will still have all of the answers right there at your hand so that you can see immediately if you got your answer correct or not. So spend some time on this, learn this. This is going to be the longest video that we have. There's one more that might be the same length as this, and it's on pronouns, and everything else will be under 15 minutes for sure, and many of them will be 5 or 10 minutes long. But this is extraordinarily important on the test, so you must get this part first. So until the next video, I will be looking forward to seeing you and giving you more information so that you can raise that SAT score. Bye-bye.